Welcome to Republican Women, Fighting to Take Back America, the podcast where we cut through the spin, champion common sense, and shine a light on the fights that matter most to the future of our country. I'm your host, NFRW President Martha Jenkins, and today's episode is one that you don't want to miss. Joining us is Congressman James Comer, who represents Kentucky's 1st Congressional District and serves as chair of the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee. Under his leadership, Oversight is doing what Washington too often avoids, asking the tough questions, following the facts, and demanding the accountability from powerful people who think the rules don't apply to them. Chairman Comer is here to discuss his recent high-profile hearings involving Bill and Hillary Clinton, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, and Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison. He will share what these hearings revealed, what the American people should know, and what real oversight looks like when leaders put citizens before the political class.
She's fighting to take back America. It's time to take a stand. She's fighting to take back America. Let your voice be heard. She's fighting to take back America. Make her proud again. Oh, the movement has already begun.
Congressman Comer, thanks so much for taking time to be with us.
My pleasure.
We appreciate your work and dedication more than you know. Obviously, we could start anywhere and have plenty of things to talk about. But tell me about the preparation that the committee does before you hold hearings.
There's a lot of preparation. We have a thing that we give all the members called guidance, where the staff has done extensive research to where each member should have more than enough knowledge about the purpose of the hearing. We have sample questions, we have themes, we have our objective of what we would like to get out of the hearing. And then in the case of what the hearing I had yesterday with Governor Tim Walz and Attorney General Keith Ellison to highlight the fraud in Minnesota with the social programs, we had 2.5 months of transcribed interviews with whistleblowers to accumulate the evidence. And we published a report prior to the hearing that would provide evidence that both Ellison and Walz knew about the fraud in Minnesota, but yet did nothing about it. So there's a lot of preparation that goes in before the committee hearings. I have a big staff on the Oversight Committee, and they do a good job.
Well, yesterday's hearings were certainly needed. We have already had Minnesota State Representative Kristen Robbins on our podcast telling us about how bad the fraud is in Minnesota. What did you learn from Governor Walz and Attorney General Ellison?
Well, I'll tell you what we learned, and the Democrats on the committee backed this up. They don't care about fraud. They're mad because President Trump cut off some of the federal funding. And the reason the president cut it off is, for one, we asked him to on the Oversight Committee, but secondly, until they get the fraud under control, they shouldn't get a penny of federal money. I think any hardworking taxpayer with any common sense would agree with that. So they were just outraged, Walz and Ellison, that there was a pause in federal funding. They wanted to keep it going. They said, yeah, there's fraud. We'll try to do something about it. That's unacceptable. They've had billions of dollars worth of fraud. Everyone in America has seen it up close and personal. And yet the arrogance of the typical Democrat governor in America is they don't care about fraud. Just keep the money coming. And if you cut off the fraud, then you're a racist, because that Somali population, you know, is heavily dependent on federal welfare benefits. And that's where the majority of the fraud was taking place. And that's not racist. That's just a fact. So the Democrats try to play the race card. They could care less about being good stewards of taxpayer dollars. That's what we saw yesterday. And I hope America saw a bunch of concerned Republicans and a president concerned about reducing waste, fraud, and abuse in the federal government.
So before you asked them a single question, you knew that they had been notified about how bad this fraud was, and yet they had not done anything to stop it.
Well, they said a couple of people had gotten arrested. Well, a couple, you're talking about thousands of fraudsters stealing billions of dollars. And, you know, it's unacceptable to continue to allow that type of fraud to happen in Minnesota, but that's what the Democrats do, and they instead of you know, complimenting us on our work to try to prevent fraud, they attack the Republicans because we're you know, cruel. It's cruel to cut off federal benefits to Minnesota. It's the fact of the matter is you've got a governor and attorney general who have allowed the fraud to continue. Our investigation proved that the state employees in Minnesota, who were predominantly Democrat, have been warning the governor and attorney general for years that this fraud was taking place. And the governor and attorney general didn't want to do anything about it because they didn't want to offend that big, massive Somali voting population in Minnesota.
Even though that some of that money was going to terrorists in Somalia.
Yeah, no, they don't care. I
unbelievable.
mean, as long as that's their base. Their base. The Democrats' base are predominantly people on welfare, people that work for the government. You know, they don't want to do anything to rock the boat. And that's what I've always criticized Democrats over. They want people on social programs. They want people to be dependent on the government, because if they can get them to be dependent on the government, this happens in Kentucky, it happens in Minnesota, it happens, you know, wherever you've got a Democrat governor. They want certain communities to be dependent on the federal government so that they can go in and be the champion for their welfare benefits. Oh, those mean Republicans, they're not wanting to give you a cost of living adjustment on your welfare. And you know, Republicans, we want to feed hungry children. We want to feed, you know, and feed and house and provide health care for disabled people, for poor children. But able-bodied people, no, we want you to work like everyone else has to. And that's a huge difference between Republicans and Democrats.
Right. And Americans who work hard and earn a good living end up doing so much better
Absolutely.
than just what welfare benefits will get them.
Absolutely.
Well, I saw this week that you were also investigating the financing behind the anti-ICE riots in Minneapolis. What are you learning there? And will you also be holding hearings on that topic?
Well, I think that President Trump's done a good job disrupting the flow of money for things like the liberal Democrat protests, like what we saw in Portland and what we see in all the big cities around the United States, because a lot of that money used to go through these what are called NGOs, non-governmental organizations. The President Trump, Doge, some of the stuff early on really focused on the NGOs. The Republicans in Congress, Republican majority have stopped that. So now you're seeing money go through what are called C4s, you know, political action committees that are dark money. Essentially, you don't have to disclose the donors, but it's a pretty common, consistent group of people that donate to that. Obviously, George Soros' son now plays a big role in that, and some other left-wing groups. We believe China's still playing a big role in funding a lot of things that can be done to rile people up to disrupt President Trump. I think that's what was happening that got, you know, 2 people killed in Minneapolis. You had, you know, protesters jumping in front of cars and stuff. I'm not saying it was justified what happened. I'm certainly not saying that. But at the end of the day, you know, if you drive through a group of police officers or you know, you kick the tail light of a police car out, it's probably not going to end well. So a lot of bad things are happening because they're being funded by these left-wing groups. At least now, I think, because of the Republican majority in the Senate, in the House, in the White House, I think we've cut off that governmental component of it, where the government was through the grants and things like that funding some of these organizations.
Well, that's good, because that is That is frankly something that makes me really angry, that my
Yeah.
tax dollars could be funneled into some of those anti-American groups.
Right.
Uh, so,
And they were
yeah.
prior to President Trump being elected.
Well, I'm really glad about that, because the NGOs have been a problem before we
Yep.
even knew about it. And
Right.
thank goodness we're shedding light on that.
Yep.
So I know all of our listeners really want to know more about the Clintons' testimony. We certainly have to judge any of their testimony with skepticism. But did the committee learn anything from their testimony?
We learned a little. They implicated some other people that I announced this week we're going to bring in. We've all seen the wedding of, we've seen the picture of Chelsea Clinton's wedding and Ghislaine Maxwell on the front row. According to Hillary Clinton, she didn't know her. She was the guest of someone else. So we're bringing that someone else in just to see if he can help us learn more about Ghislaine Maxwell, or to determine whether or not Hillary Clinton was telling the truth. The Clintons are very difficult people to depose. They're very skilled politicians, especially Bill Clinton. But we presented every ounce of evidence that the American people have seen. Anybody that watches Fox or reads Breitbart or any conservative publication, you've seen pictures of Bill Clinton with what appear to be young girls getting a massage in a hot tub. Of course, President Clinton under oath said he couldn't recall any of that, didn't know who they were. Mrs. Clinton, there were emails for Jeffrey Epstein was talking about how he had just met her and she was prettier in person than she claimed they never met. We showed her a picture of her with Jeffrey Epstein. She didn't recall meeting him. The same answers you would expect, but for the first time, the Clintons had to answer questions about Epstein and Maxwell, whereas President Trump answers questions every day about Epstein and Maxwell. This was the first time the Clintons had to answer questions, and every bit of evidence that we all see on the internet, on Facebook and Twitter about the Clintons and their relationship, they were asked about it. Now, they gave answers. Now, were they truthful or not? I guess time will tell, but they did sit for 10 hours worth of depositions, and I think it was a productive thing, and we made it public so everybody in America can see. And I think that answered a lot of questions that people had about the Clintons with respect to Epstein. And that's what the whole purpose of this investigation is to try to get the truth to the American people. There are a lot of rumors about Epstein that I don't think is true. There are a lot of things that are being AI generated on the internet about the Epstein crimes that aren't true. But at the end of the day, they were horrific crimes. The two primary criminals in this whole thing were Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. Of course, Epstein's dead, and I deposed Ghislaine Maxwell, and she pled the fifth, so she wouldn't answer any questions. So when your main witness is dead and the other main witness is pleading the fifth, and then many of the co-conspirators are either dead or in their late 80s and 90s, and it's a difficult investigation. You remember, these crimes happened decades ago. We're doing our best, and I think we're seeing accountability. We've seen over a dozen people resign from boards. We're bringing in Bill Gates, the Clintons, Pam Bondi. We're bringing in some of the most powerful people in the world. Britain's got Prince Andrew and their former ambassador to the United States in for questioning now over there. So hopefully we'll see some accountability. But at the end of the day, I think if we can get the truth to the American people, that'll be a pretty big accomplishment for the House Oversight Committee.
Well, I haven't watched all 10 hours of their testimony, but were some of the questions related to the Clinton Global Initiative and the fact that both of those criminals, Epstein and Maxwell, had contributed to it?
Yes, and you'll have to see. Hillary Clinton didn't know anything about the Clinton Global Initiative. She said she was in the Senate when that was being set up, which she's given interviews in the past saying that she was an active participant in the setup of the Clinton Global Initiative, but under oath, she said she had nothing to do with it. And of course, in the emails, Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell say they were key players in getting that set up and funding it. Now, what people are saying in the depositions about Epstein, whether they be Bill Clinton or Wexner, or we've heard President Trump say this, they all say he was, Epstein was a shyster and was dishonest, and I can say that's factual. So again, and he's not alive to be able to defend himself, and which makes the investigation even more difficult. But I thought it was ironic that Hillary kept saying she didn't have anything to do with the setup of the Clinton Global Initiative.
Oh, well, that is definitely not feasible.
Right.
Because we all know that all the money was coming into that when she was Secretary of State and running for president.
Yeah.
So, that's it's unfathomable that she didn't know exactly what was going on
Right.
there and didn't have her
Yeah.
hands in it. So you mentioned Pam Bondi. I know that she's going to be called to for, I guess, is that your next hearing? And
Probably. I don't know if we're going to do it with a hearing or deposition. The committee members voted yesterday for Bondi to come in and answer questions. I tried to get her to come in and give an update, but this is what happened. So we have a lot of questions. We want the documents. I think that's very clear. Republicans and the Democrats, I think we want them for different reasons. The Democrats hope and pray there's something bad in there about Trump, which I don't think there is. Republicans just want to get the truth to the American people. We're about transparency, and we're trying to get those documents. It's a challenge. I say this when talking about the release of the documents. There are a lot of class action lawsuits. There are a lot of settlements that have already been made. So there are things that would prevent the release of certain documents by lower courts. And it's a challenge to get all this. So, the media is all over the board in whether or not all the documents have been released or not. But I think Bondi will have an opportunity to answer those questions, and we can go from there.
okay, so some of the documents are sealed by courts after
Yes.
court cases have been settled. Okay,
100%.
that happens all the time on all kinds of topics. Okay. Well, Congressman Comer, what else can you tell us about the next steps for your committee?
We think there's fraud in other states. We think there's rampant Medicaid fraud. I see it in my home state of Kentucky. We're going to continue to try to get whistleblowers to come in like we did in Minnesota, to come in and help us expose fraud in other states. We think this Somali fraud isn't just happening in Minnesota. We think there's Somali fraud in California, in Illinois, in Maine. And it's not just Somali fraud. There's fraud everywhere. So that's kind of the mission of the Oversight Committee. We want to root out waste, fraud, abuse, and mismanagement in the federal government. That's our mission statement. So we're going to continue to focus on trying to identify waste, fraud, and abuse in the federal government. And first steps to cut the money off. Second steps to try to hold people accountable for abusing the taxpayers' trust.
Well, as a taxpayer myself, I certainly appreciate that. I remember President Trump said in his State of the Union message, was that just last week? It seems like
Yes.
about a month ago now.
Yes.
That if we were able to eliminate waste, fraud, and abuse, that we could balance the budget. And
Yeah.
I really don't doubt that.
Yeah, I think it would help. I don't know that even that would balance the budget. We've got so much of our spending is entitlement spending, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and military. That's the overwhelming percentage of the budget. You'll have members of Congress like Rand Paul say, "Oh, they spent $1 million here and $1 million there." Okay, and I don't like how they spent that $1 million here, $1 million there. But at the end of the day, we're talking about a $2 to $3 trillion annual debt. So that's not even a grain of salt in the whole scheme of things. If we're gonna balance the budget, we got to talk about saving trillions, and we don't want to cut Social Security. There are reforms that possibly need to be made, but that's going to have to be bipartisan, and there's no one in Washington talking about that. So we've got to look at how do we either significantly cut spending or significantly increase revenue. And one of the things the president tried to do to significantly increase revenue is the tariffs. And he feels that that's a fair tax that will promote America first. If companies don't want to pay the tariffs, then they can produce it in the United States and hire American workers and pay taxes, local taxes in America. So that's one of the things the president's trying to do to reduce the deficit.
Well, Congressman Comer, we appreciate you giving us this time so much today. And
Thank you.
we appreciate also the work and the heavy lifting that you're doing in your committee. We know that you're doing your part to make America great again. So thank you again so much for being with us.
Well, thank you for everything you all do. I really appreciate it.
All right. Thank you so much. If you're watching this podcast and you are not a member of NFRW, please go to nfrw.org or email membership@nfrw.org. Also, please like, share, and subscribe to the Republican Women Fighting to Take Back America podcast on YouTube, Rumble, and Spotify. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, X, Truth Social, and TikTok.